this day. We thank you, Father, for this city. And Father God, we just thank you that the vision and goal hopefully would be that a city is not one person, but it's a community, and a community that cares about one another, a community that will flow together and work together, and Father, a council that will be able to work and flow together, and Father God, the management that will be the leader that needs to be, which he is. And Father, we just thank you for every department that we have within the city and how they flow and work together, and Father, be a blessing and help save us, help deliver us, help protect us. And Father, we just thank you for all the things, so many things to be thankful for this day. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Darrell. Next item.
Item 4A, a proclamation for Fair Trade Day.
All right, if I could have Jane Taylor come to the podium there. Jane, we'll present a proclamation to you. How are you? Nice to see you again. Thanks for coming. Let's just step right forward here. We'll present the proclamation, and if you'd like to make a few comments about Fair Trade Day, that would be great. Okay, fine. Whereas in 2017, Jane E. Wagler proposed to the Hutchinson City Council that Hutchinson be declared a fair trade town on National Fair Trade Day, which is the second Saturday in May of each year, starting May 12th, 2018. And whereas World Fair Trade Day is an inclusive worldwide festival of events celebrating fair trade's contribution to the fight against poverty, exploitation, and climate change. And whereas the Fair Trade Town campaign was first launched in 2001 in Garstang, Lancashire, under the initiative of Bruce Crowther, a local Oxfam supporter, and the Garstang Oxfam group. The initiative was aimed to promote fair trade certified goods in the town. And whereas fair trade is a long-term solution to retail justice and insurance to environmental sustainability. And whereas fair trade puts Hutchinson on the map of a national movement for supporting green and fairly traded goods. Whereas fair trade recognizes Hutchinson's board, volunteer staff, and supporting customers, progressive and forward-thinking in sustaining Hutchinson's only local fair trade store at 10,000 Villages on Main Street for the past 40 years. Now therefore, I, John Daveline, Mayor of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the second Saturday in May as Fair Trade Day in the City of Hutchinson, and urge all citizens to celebrate and participate in the fair trade movement, which will promote the well-being of this and future generations. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Fair Trade Day? Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Jane Wagler, and I work at the 10,000 Villages store in Hutch. And I'm very excited about the possibility of promoting Hutchinson as a fair trade city. What that means is it forces us to think about retail justice. It also forces us to think about being good stewards of the environment. I really would like to leave a better environment for our children in the future and the children of our children, and that all starts here. Fair trade is about, we are what we consume. What we consume says a lot about our priorities, about what is important for us, and about our health. So I'm really excited about getting people to think about the footprint of their dollar, as well as the effect of that on their health and the environment and just the community. Are there any questions? The store in Hutch has been here for 40 years. Most of you don't know about it, but it has been, and it is on Main Street. So please do come downtown. I mean, Jim has done good things, so come downtown and check it out.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jane. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, next item, please.
Item 5, oral communications from the audience.
All right, this is the time we set aside for oral communications from the audience on items that are not on the agenda and items that are related to the Hutchinson community. So is there anyone in the audience this morning? Hi there.
Good morning, City Council. Amy Allison, Housing Program Coordinator. I just wanted to take the time today to invite you to the 4th of 6 Housing and Neighborhood Seminars we're hosting this year. It will be Home Inspection Basics this time, and it will be taught by Jody Suhler from South Central Kansas Economic Development District. You might remember him from our Community Development Block Grant that we had a couple years ago. It'll take place Tuesday, August 29th at 5 p.m. And so we're just going to try and provide more training for renters and potential homeowners who are looking to get more information about kind of what to look for when you walk into a house that you want to rent or you want to buy. So please attend if you have the opportunity to. We will also be posting this on our Facebook page. Again, if you haven't had the opportunity, please go and like our Facebook page, Hutchinson Planning Development. We also do have a Twitter account now, so making a few steps today. So
Amy, is that here?
it will. We are working that out. We're trying to have it at a house so people can get hands-on experience. So we will have that information hopefully by the end of the day. So
Okay. Thank you.
please be on the lookout.
Thank you, Amy. All right, anyone else in the audience? All right, seeing none. Next item.
Item 6, consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes, next item.
Item 7A, public hearing to consider adoption of the 2018 budget.
We need a motion to open the public hearing.
So move. Second.
So move and a second. All righty, please call roll.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes.
Morning, Mayor, Council, John Deerdoff, City Manager, and I know people are here for a lot of other things on the agenda, and they get the bonus today to hear a little bit about our 2018 budget. What I thought I might do is just take a little bit of time during this public hearing just to provide a quick overview of the budget and a little bit about how we got to where we are today. Our budget, if I can get that to plot down there. Our budget process actually begins each February when our department heads and directors begin to work on their capital improvement program, their equipment replacement needs. Then through the months of April and May, we work on our operating budgets. During that time, myself and the finance director sit down with each of our directors to look at their individual budgets. We then begin a series of study sessions with the City Council and Council. We've had 6 total study sessions. The first one we started on May 23rd, where we reviewed our capital improvements and equipment programs. May 30th, we reviewed our utility funds, primarily looking at water and sewer and some of the issues that we were dealing with there. We then, on June 13th, met to review all those funds that are supported by property tax, and that would be, of course, the general fund, the golf, airport, Fund Valley, animal shelter. And then we continue some additional study sessions on June 27th, July 5th, and then on July 18th was our last informal study session, and that was the day the council set the maximum to exceed amount of our budget and set our public hearing for today. The proposed budget, as it stands now, calls for a mill levy increase of about 0.34 mills, so represents about $107,000 in additional property tax from that. This is our first year in budgeting under the new tax lid, and the tax lid, what it essentially does is really cap our growth in property tax revenue by a couple of things. One of those is a consumer price index average over the past 5 years, which in this budget we had a 1.4% increase, and then any new improvements we have on assessed valuation. So we really got about $222,000 of cap authority under those two areas. The mill levy, this gives a little bit of history of our mill levy. Going back to 2008 to 2009, you can see we had a pretty good jump there. I think 3 mills in 2009. We followed that up with a reduction in the next year in 2010, and then had 5 years of pretty steady mill levy, and then we went up again in 2015, and the council recall that was a part of the infusion of $400,000 into our annual street program. In 2016, then we had a small reduction. We had a mill increase, 1 mill in 2017, and then this year's 0.34, just to give you a little bit of pictorial of what that mill levy looks like over the years. Our assessed valuation we used for preparation of this year's budget, we saw a 0.652% increase in our assessed valuation. You can see, so we went from $303.9 million in assessed valuation to $307 million. And you can see from this, our valuation has been is growing very small increments over this period of time, but that just gives you a look at that. Overall, our general fund expenses are up, or are actually up 2.4% less than they were in 2017, and most of that was a result of cuts in our capital improvement program and our equipment replacement fund. When we just look at operating expenses, that would be personnel services, commodities, and contractuals were actually down, or actually up 2.1% higher than last year. And you know, the general fund makes up really the core services of what the city does, our public safety, our parks and facilities, planning, streets, administration. And you can see from this graph that personnel costs represent right at 68% of our total general fund budget. So roughly 70% of our general fund is related to personnel. And you know, that scenario makes it really difficult when we're looking at having to reduce expenses yet expected to maintain the same level of services. And we talked about that challenge during the course of the last couple of months. Just a couple highlights on general fund expenditures that hit us. Wages, we've got about $200,000 allocated for wage increases for our employees next year. Kansas Police and Fire retirement system percentage went up. That's our contribution to our police and fire retirement program, about $170,000. Our health insurance, we budgeted a couple $100,000, and right now that's still a moving target as we're still doing our renewal. I actually think that's going to be a little bit higher, but we've got in the budget the $200,000 increase. And then our work comp insurance, we increased that by $215,000, and that was really one of these issues where the Department of Labor was looking at our fund balances in our work comp fund. We're self-funded work comp, and we're concerned a little bit about our trend with our balances. And so they asked for a plan to improve upon that. And so we presented them with a plan that over the course of the next few years, we'll begin to fund that at a higher level to improve that fund balance. On the revenue side of things, the big three, of course, property tax, sales tax, and franchise fees. And those three right there represent 85% of our total general fund budget. Sales tax at 35%. Followed closely by property tax at 33%, and then franchise fees at roughly 15%. And the council will recall during our budget discussions this year when we looked at our sales tax revenue, we actually budgeted just flat and no growth in our sales tax revenue for next year, which is really a rarity for us. And most of that was based on our year-to-date sales tax projections were about 3.8% lower this year than for the same period last year, and so. That's certainly a concerning trend for us. We've talked about that. We've typically been able to rely on a little bit of increase in our sales tax to help our budget each year, and obviously it's a major revenue source for us. This graph here represents our spending versus our revenues, and this picture certainly isn't perfect. Expenses on the top line, revenues on the bottom line. You'd hope it would be flipped. And we spent a lot of time talking about this last year, but going back to 2011, is when we really were at a time where we were budgeting what we were spending more or spending less than what we were bringing in. And so 2012 through 2014 we did that. In 2015 we saw our actual spending, as you can see on this graph, exceed our annual revenues by $385,000. In 2016, $718,000. And then we budgeted $1.3 million in expenses over revenues for this year. And then the 18 budget, as you see today, is in balance at $775,000. So, and the council recall a lot of trimming got us to where we're at today with that figure. But what's happened due to our strong fund balances in our general fund, we've talked about that. We've been able to approve budgets that are structurally imbalanced. Now they're balanced according to state law because our fund balances are part of the total budget. But this is really a trend that is concerning to me. I know it's concerning to the council. We've talked about that. The good news is, I guess if there is that typically we don't spend 100% of our budgets. And so I expect that gap, that $785,000 be better in 2018. I think a good start for that would be if our 2017 gap is minimized as well. So again, we talked a lot about that this year. This is our general fund balance. Not a like, again, not a great picture. Just to kind of go back, the council adopted a policy about 6 or 7 years ago as to what a fund balance target should be for our city. And we developed a policy based on 3 parameters. And one of those was having $2 million for a natural disaster, $2 million for tax stabilization during economic decline. Maybe we have a year where sales tax really falls down. And then 1 month's expense. And those all combined would have our target of about 6.5 million. And the GOFA, the National Finance Association, they suggest that a city have no less than 2 months operating expenses as a fund balance. In our case, that'd be about 2 million. So our 6.5 is really pretty much on target. And I think we shared with you some information that we looked at other cities at fund balances, and our 6.5 target was really on the high end of those cities. And but I've always been a big believer in fund balances and really concerned a little bit about the picture that we have here. So again, as I just said, I'm hoping that we can reverse that trend starting even with this year, so that our projected fund balance at the end of 2017 is better than the 4.6 million that we've got targeted there. So, and again, I know the council's aware of that. We spent a lot of time talking about that. But the fact that our fund balances are strong has helped us, but the problem has been our revenue growth just isn't there. And we just don't have that incremental increase in sales tax that we've had in previous years. And obviously expenses continue to go up when we've got 70% of our general fund budget related to personnel. That's an issue. Moving on to our street program, staff shared with our city council back in 2014. Some of you were on the council at the time. I know the mayor was, and I think Jade may have been. I'm going back. I don't remember who was all there then. And we expressed concern with getting less done on our streets each year by allocating the same amount of money each year, which we had been doing for many years. And it was really a case where we just weren't keeping pace. Our funding wasn't keeping pace with the cost of construction, the cost of materials. And the council expressed concern with that and asked staff to put together a program or develop a report to bring back to you to get us back on track. And so in April of 2014, our public works staff, engineering staff, put together what we called a State of the Streets presentation. And the report really just focused on the importance of the timing of preservations when we when we do an overlay on a street, our current funding level. We also looked at our peer review. How do we relate to other cities, and how much are they spending on streets? And then a recommended level of increased funding. And at that time, the recommended level of increased funding was $400,000. And so we injected another $400,000 into our street program in 16 and of course in 17. And then this year, we actually cut that by $200,000 because of some of the issues we were facing. So anyway, just to give you an overview of where we're at there. So we're still spending more in 18 than we were prior to 2016, but again, that's going to be a challenge for us. And of course, we've got the quarter-cent sales tax issue coming up that is very important to this program. So just a quick look at capital improvements. I'm not going to go through all these, but in 2017, our total capital improvement program spending was $14 million. In 18, this year's budget, it's 11.5. So again, a lot of our cuts that we made earlier this year or this summer were from this area. So a couple just highlights. We'll continue the Main Street project. That will get done one day, and just trust me, I think it will. Airport T-hangers, we've got $370,000 there. We've talked about that for years. We talked about that this year, and I think the general feeling was that if there's demand and the feasibility studies can show that we can actually rent these, then it makes sense, and hopefully we're going to be able to provide that. I got a $200,000 for the zoo educational building. The Rice Park East parking lot, $118,000. That took a big hit during the ice storm. That was one of our drop sites, and we had so much equipment in there, just really tore it up. And then we've got a lot of money allocated in our water, sewer, and storm sewer utilities for projects there. So utilities, just a quick thought on that. The last time the city raised water and sewer rates was in 2011. In 2015-16, we conducted a water rate study, and council will remember that. We brought that to the council in I guess, spring of 2016 as part of the 2017 budget process. And the report determined that we needed to increase both water and sewer rates, and because essentially our spending, again, like we were in the general fund, was exceeding our revenues, and our fund balances were getting to be reduced. And through that process, the council determined that they didn't want to increase rates in 17, as we were looking at a mill increase then, and that we would revisit that again in 2018. And just to refresh your memories on what the rate study showed, it was showing that we needed to raise sewer rates over a 5-year period. The first year at 22.9%, the next year at 0, 220 at 9.4, the next year after that 0, and then followed in the 5th year at 5%. And then water was a recommended 5.5 increase for each of the 5 years. And the council obviously expressed concerns, particularly with the sewer, that upfront big number, and asked us to bring back a proposal that would even that out. And so what we have in the budget as it stands today is an increase in the sewer of 7% equal over the 5 years each, and then water at the 5.5% for 5 years. And that information or that approval will come back to you later this fall in an ordinance form. So that, Mayor, concludes my comments on the 2018 budget. Just to give you a quick, I mean, you all know we spent a lot of hours, a lot of time on this, and this certainly didn't probably do it justice, but really just a quick glimpse of that. And I'll turn it back over to you to conduct the balance of the public hearing, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Deerdoff. Appreciate it very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to make any public comments regarding the 2018 budget? Yes, sir.
Good morning, City Council.
Morning, sir.
My name is Ron Caffrey, and I am the chairman of our Airport Advisory Committee. And I would like to just say I'm so happy to see on the capital improvement that there's some T-hangers.
Right.
I've been on the board over 5 years, and one of the very first things we began to talk about was additional T-hangers. And being in the aviation community, I can tell you there is demand. I know when Riverside Airport closed in northwest Wichita, there were about 50 airplanes needed a place to go. And a number of communities, Newton, for instance, I know in Kingman, empty hangars just immediately filled up. And I do believe that it won't take long to fill those hangars. I can't verify that, but I would sure think from everything the talk in the aviation community that there's huge demand for that. So appreciate seeing that on there. At our last Airport Advisory Committee meeting, we were made aware of the efforts to balance the city budget. We do fully understand the importance of maintaining a fiscal policy that keeps the city in good financial order. However, as we understand, part of that budget constraint could involve discontinuation of the runway protection zone. The fund was established following a ruling by the FAA in the early 90s for land use guidelines in the area known as the RPZ. Although some progress has been made in this area, there remains many properties to be purchased for compliance. We feel strongly that the airport land reserve account should continue to be funded. Although there has not been any pressure placed on us by the FAA to complete the clearing required, we understand there is a property or two for sale currently within the RPZ. We do rely heavily on FAA funding for the improvement of our airport, and although nothing has been suggested, it's always a possibility that funding in the future could be subject to compliance with the RPZ. Bottom line is our advisory board would like to suggest that we strongly consider continued funding of the airport land reserve account. Any questions?
Well, first of all, Mr. Caffrey, thank you for your service to the Airport Advisory Committee. We appreciate that very much, and we appreciate the input from the Airport Advisory Committee. I think as you perhaps have seen, there is a commitment of this elected body in the past and hopefully in the future that we want to continue to invest in capital improvement projects at the airport. Hopefully this is the beginning. So with that, I think Mr. Deerdoff might have a comment or two regarding the your item in terms of how we might approach this in the future.
Yeah, I think the RPZ, I mean, we, as everybody knows, we did working on the first house, I guess, purchased, and that's done, and we allocated $150,000 last year, plus we had some funds in a sitting fund to make that purchase. I believe it was over $200 and some thousand, $220,000. And that was just a number. We had 150, I think, in the proposed budget for this year. And, you know, when we started looking at cuts, it's one of those that just is kind of, I don't want to say it's an easy cut, but it's one of those that gets your attention. And my thought would be that if we do have a voluntary sale come up, and we may, it takes a while, it may be some time, and we can evaluate our financial situation at that time, see how we're doing from our fund balance, as I talked about earlier. Hopefully we improve upon that, and then maybe we can, you know, continue to make those purchases one at a time. So it's just a little frustrating. We've been talking about this since the early 90s, and one house has been purchased, and you ask the question, we've asked the question a lot, is what is the FAA position on this? And it's, you know, make progress. So I guess we made progress, not a lot, when you think about it, but there's still a lot of work to do there. And I think someday it's going to come, and there's going to be that do it now or else kind of deal, unfortunately. And so hopefully we can get out ahead of that. And, you know, purchasing these voluntarily is a lot easier than going through the eminent domain process. So.
Thank you.
And I don't, to interject, I want to make sure too, Mr. Caffrey has suggested maybe that we were discontinuing funding that. Are we not just deferring that for this year and looking at funding it potentially in future years? Again, we don't know what our sales tax revenue is going to look like, property tax.
That probably sounds better than discontinuing.
Well, yeah. I wanted to clarify for my own
Semantics,
purposes
yeah.
as well, but.
No, and that's the thought. I mean, yeah, I think it's always going to be there. I think every year when Peter does a lot of the FA work, that's always a checklist where you know, are we making progress there? And I think one day it's going to become one of those, you know, mandates, let's get it done. And so hopefully we don't want to leave the impression that we're walking away from that effort, because it's going to have to be addressed, you know, at some point in time.
And remind me how many properties are in that? Are there about a dozen? Less than a dozen in that zone?
How many, Peter, remember, properties?
Good morning. Peter Miller, Hutchinson Airport Manager. There's actually 27 lots that are involved. Out of those 27 lots, there are, well, now there's only 14 actual structures that would be affected.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
Just, the only thought we had, of course, is if you stop funding this program, where do you make a decision to start funding it again? And,
Sure.
And that was our concern. So.
Absolutely. And I will say, too, when it was brought to my attention a few years ago when I heard about it, I recognized also that it may not be an issue right now, but it will certainly be an issue one day. It may not be at our airport, but when something happens somewhere, then they're going to prioritize that up to the top, and then we'll have some hard decisions to make. So I hear you.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Sir, you made good points, and I trust that as chair and the remainder of the board will make it a point to keep that in front of us. Given the budget situation, just difficult decisions need to be made. I'm hopeful that down the road we can find the way clear to be able to begin again putting some money into that fund. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, anyone else in the audience that would like to make any comments during the public hearing? All right, seeing none, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes. Just as a sidebar, below or following some other items here, we will actually be considering the 2018 budget for adoption or non-adoption here later on the agenda. So if you'd like to stay for that, that would be fine. All right, next item.
Item 8A, consider resolution approving the Hutchinson Rod Run as a special event in a designated entertainment district.
Paul Brown, City Attorney. You have before you a proposed resolution for this year's 2017 Hutchinson Rod Run, and you'll see the map coming up there before you showing the district. Really no changes from the prior year in terms of the area of the district except for a little section on East 2nd Avenue. So the event and its area remains the same. The dates are September 29 through October 1. And attached to that, you'll also see the security plan proposed for this particular event, and really no changes from the prior years except for that little change on the area that it includes. Questions from the council?
Questions, council?
No.
It's gotten to be pretty routine in many ways.
Yeah.
What years, is it mentioned any place, this is, how many years have we been doing this?
10.
10?
Ten.
This is the 10th year? Very good.
All right, do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the resolution authorizing the Hutchinson Rod Run September 29, 2017 through October 1, 2017 as a special event pursuant to City Code Section 18-801 and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes, next item.
Item 8B, consider resolution approving the Hutch Brew Fest as a special event in a designated entertainment district.
And here's a second similar resolution. You have not seen one for this event before. In the prior year, we did not have a resolution. There was a change in the agents for the alcohol beverage control. They asked that in the future when we do this event that we provide a resolution and designate it as a special event district, which is not difficult. We just provide the resolution to the council. So this event is not brand new. It is a second year. It was around last year. It's just that you're seeing it for a proposed resolution. A little harder to see on this particular map, but it's the red dotted line that is actually the event district. This one has a lot more detail about where the concessions are and where the other pavilions are. It is a single day event, and with the hours being from 1 to 6 on October 14. Questions from the council?
Okay.
Who is sponsoring this event?
This is the Hutchinson News.
I see some representatives here. Did you
Yeah.
want to comment on this event?
All right, please come forward, ma'am. Mhm.
Hi.
Morning.
Thank you for allowing us to be here. My name's Jeannie Sharp. I'm the Marketing Solutions Director with the Hutchinson News. And we're pleased to be putting on this event for the second year in beautiful George Powell Park across the street. Last year was our inaugural event and went very well. We were pleased with, blessed with wonderful weather, wonderful staff, and wonderful participants. This year, we're looking to grow the event. We plan to have, you have the map in front of you here up on the screen, but you'll see that we have 6 food trucks. This is a event that was kind of created somewhat like Oktoberfest, only without that name, with more of a local name with the Brew Fest. So it's a food and beer event, but it's a under control beer event, let's say. Put it that way. We don't have kegs. This is a trial, and in keeping with the environmental sensibilities, I wanted to just point out a few changes that we're making this year. Last year we had done little disposable cups so that people could go to each station and try out a different craft beer. We have local partnership with City Beverage. That was our partner brewery, and we had about 10 breweries. This year we expect to have 13 breweries and 20 beers, but this year we're going to do something a little different. We're going to have taster cups like these that will be a souvenir and environmentally friendly. So people can take these with them. They can reuse the same cup. We'll have Culligan Water is a partner that will have dipping stations so people can change it out and make sure they get to appreciate the flavors of it. We're partnering again with the Reno County Museum. So we will, on the patio, we're expanding it this year to include, there's quite a population locally of craft home brewers. So they will have their own space out there for the VIPs to enjoy that area. The theme this year, we're going with more of a 50s theme, and I do have a handout for you that you don't have on the screen that I'll share with everyone. Last year we had a Turbis cup that you can see the design on with our lovely Hutchinson Water Tower too, and the other sponsors that are on there. And so this is a updated theme. But our benefactor this year will be Toys for Tots. Toys for Tots is where last year it was a zoo, and so we're rotating, kind of spread the money around to the others that would also like assistance. And one thing we learned last year is that that we needed more volunteers. We had a lot of volunteers, but we're going to have even more this year, so we have shorter lines for waiting, because we had lots of folks that were very patient, but we will have more people this year. We're going to be doing this in conjunction with Stratica has their Tour de Salt bike race that day. So that is from 8 to noon, and so we're doing a combination with them so that they'll have a way to rebuild their carbs that afternoon. So we'll have them at our event as well. And this is sponsored by the Hutchinson News, as well as some of the local sponsors that I noted. But it's Heartland Credit Union being one of the major sponsors for this event. We'll have several bands. We're still finalizing the bands. We had a great band last year, and we had some polka from Hayes last year, so this year we'll have some local bands.
Good. Glad to hear about that polka.
That's a throwback.
We even saw John Montgomery out there with polka last year. See if we can get a return visit. But I'd be happy to entertain any questions. We've enjoyed working with Jim and the city team. They've all been very cooperative and helpful with suggestions for us on how to implement this. One of the things I think we recommended that we'll be doing is we did go through a lot of ice, and so I think we're going to you guys put in a new outlet, junction box, whatever you call it, for electricity. And so we'll have a freezer out there for our own ice, so we won't have to be coming in and out with ice, so we'll have a freezer for ice. So that'll make it a little easier as we go through the day. But I entertain any questions anybody may have.
Questions?
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Just
Just a great opportunity, another focal point for downtown.
Yep.
And I think that really underscores what a great beautiful downtown we have, and it's a natural venue for these kinds of activities.
Yes, it really was. It was a beautiful day, and it was, I think everybody enjoyed the park. There are a lot of people I don't know that they use that park, and but it was great. And so, and we also had the advantage of the nice space along the fire department area where we had parking, so we'll have an extra food truck there to kind of space out the food trucks too, so that will be helpful as well.
What's the admission fee?
It's $30 for non-drinking and $60. Oh, sorry. We're doing a lot of events lately. $60 for VIP, $30 regular admission. I should introduce Anita Stuckey and Leslie Shea are doing the heavy lifting on our event. So we've been doing a lot of events lately. We just finished our 10K at Crazy Horse 2 weeks ago, and we have our Best of the Best, which will be downtown next week at Main Street events. So got a lot going on.
You are busy.
Yes.
Yeah. Are all the breweries in state?
Yes.
Okay.
We have.
Interesting.
You'll see along the top, those are all the anticipated breweries. There are a few extras that City Beverage put on there. We'll be coming out with lists on social media of the exact beers because they are selecting the ones.
Yeah.
But I know last year I was working a table with one of the breweries, and a lot of people are very loyal to certain ones, and came from, we had visitors from Hayes and beyond, a lot of outlying areas, western Kansas, that came to participate in the event, so we had good attendance. And I guess I should say, we had just under 500 last year, and we're hoping to grow up to 750 this year.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's
Very
our
good.
attendance
Interesting,
goal.
yeah.
So,
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
okay, super,
Appreciate
thanks
it.
so much. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the resolution authorizing the Hutch Brew Fest October 14th, 2017 as a special event pursuant to City Code Section 18-801 and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second?
Motion and a second. Please call roll.
Pyros de Carvalho,
Yes.
Soldner,
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes.
Deckent.
Yes.
Dateline.
Yes. Next item.
Item 9A, consider request for conditional use permit for billboard sign.
Good morning, I'm Casey Jones, Senior Planner with the city, and I'll be presenting some slides for you regarding this conditional use permit request. We received a request from Idea Tech Media, and the applicant, Daniel Friesen, is here with us in the audience today, and he also brought with him Jared Reimer. Both of them are here on behalf of Idea Tech Media. So later on, if you have any questions for them, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer those. The property where they'd like to place this sign is owned by Central Bank and Trust. And here's just a map showing you the general location of that property. It's at the northwest corner of 17th and Lorraine here in the city. Central Bank has a drive-through bank at that location, and there's already an existing billboard sign there. It's an electronic billboard sign, and currently it's a 160 square foot billboard sign with only one side on it. It faces the east, and Idea Tech Media would like to replace that sign, modify it with a little bit larger sign going up to 300 square feet. A 10 by 30 basically, and they'd like to have it be a double-sided billboard. So it would be electronic. The face that faces eastward would be electronic, and the face facing west would just be a static, non-electronic billboard. As you can see, the area that it's located in is zoned C4. That's a special commercial district, and according to our code, billboards in that district require this type of review by the Planning Commission and then City Council. Moving on to the site plan that we requested from the applicant, that little bit in yellow there is the location of the sign. And it shows you just the general setbacks of it. It's not inside any easements or anything like that, and it's set back a pretty good distance from the street. And I just have a few photographs here. These are photographs that staff went out and took prior to the public hearing, and we showed these photos to the Planning Commission. These are photos of the existing sign that's out there today, from several different viewpoints.
Did you wait for it to say "Welcome to Hutchinson" on there? Nice catch.
We've got some other other ads there as well. So you can see they use the sign for all sorts of advertising, public messages, and whatnot. This is a view looking west from 17th and Lorraine. And the Central Bank sign and the billboard sign are both on the same parcel. They're both on Central Bank's property. That Kohl's sign is on a different property farther down the street. And this is the back side of the sign, the side that actually is the west-facing sign. This is looking toward the east, and you can see there's no advertising on it currently. And what the applicant would like to do is this. This is the proposed west face, the static image, and then the other side of the sign would look something similar to this. And if you've seen the sign that's near the intersection of 30th and Lorraine, well, that sign is virtually the same as this. It's very similar in size. I believe it's double-sided. So that's generally what this sign would look like if it were to go here. We did have a public hearing on August 1st with the Planning Commission, and the commission recommended approval, and that was a unanimous vote. And there were 7 conditions. These are listed in your staff report. General conditions that they recommended be placed on the billboard. That it shall only be used for a double-sided billboard at that location, 1330 East 17th Avenue. And then the Planning Commission recommended that each face of the sign shall be limited to 300 square feet in size. That's the maximum size allowed under our code. And you'll note in our staff report that staff had actually recommended limiting the size to no larger than it currently is, just considering character of the neighborhood and so forth. And the Planning Commission didn't recommend putting any limits on that. They felt that this type of sign would be appropriate for the neighborhood, that it was similar to the intersection at 30th and Lorraine. They didn't feel there was a whole lot of difference between those 2 locations and didn't see much of an impact from enlarging the sign a little bit. So they recommended going with the 300 square feet as proposed. Moving on to the 3rd condition, electrical wiring shall be placed underground. Number 4, a sign permit shall be obtained prior to installation. 5, the sign shall be designed and installed according to the approved plans. Number 6, if the sign is not installed completely by August 15th, 2018, which is 1 year from now, the conditional use permit shall expire automatically. And then 7, failure to comply with the conditions of approval may result in revocation of the conditional use permit. So that is what the Planning Commission had recommended. Do you have any questions of staff or of the applicant at all at this time?
Casey, there may be questions, but I'd like to have the applicant come forward. Sure. And if you would, Mr. Friesen, and kind of give us your insights from the material that was provided to us and the letter that you presented to the Planning Commission and some of your thoughts.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council
And
members.
welcome, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Mayor. Yeah, we appreciate the time to address the council on our conditional use permit. My name's Daniel Friesen. I'm a partner at Ideatech and Chief Innovation Officer. I want to first thank planning staff and zoning staff for their work on this, and we've worked through a few disagreements, and we went to the zoning and planning board and sought their approval, received a unanimous approval from them as well. I've got a presentation, but I know you have a lot of other things to talk about today, so I'll just briefly touch on what we did, and we can go through as much detail as you request. Okay. But our main reason for upgrading this sign was it's getting old. If you've been through there, it's about 10 years old. It's a little grainy. New technology for signs really have made these signs look really, really good now, and the difference is quite impressive. If you look at the sign at 30th and Lorraine, just the color and the vibrancy of these new signs really, we believe increases the aesthetics of streetscape if you do it right. We've spent a lot of time since we purchased this company about 6 months ago to make sure our ads and the designs on those boards are within a quality standard that we require for all of our companies. And I think you should see that in our sign advertising. And the other reason is this sign is quite a distance away from the intersection. It's almost 300 feet, and when you get that far, you can actually, if you drive there and visually look at it, it just I think in general looks a little far away, and it's a little harder to read. And from our point of view, we feel like a larger sign actually is safer for drivers because they can read it. They can the viewability is where we want it to be, and so we think in general having the wrong size, and we think this one was a little small for the distance away, is a a negative effect to the aesthetics. So increasing it to the right proportion, in our view, is a better design and implementation for that corner. And you know, just in general, you know, we realize billboards and in general can have a bad name, and these electronic billboards are a little different than that. They provide an opportunity to get communications out for numerous entities, including you know, our commercial clients. But you'll see a lot of our billboard customers are nonprofits. The city has some ads on there. Some of them we've provided pro bono, like the City of Hutchinson ad up there. The Splash Park is on there. Hutch Rec uses it quite a bit for events they're doing. And so we find it as a community, part of the community communications platform as well. And so it's a little different than a static ad where you may have a beer ad on there for 6 months. You know, this is vibrant, it's fresh. We make sure there's community advertising on there. And so we feel like these in strategic locations are an important part of a vibrant community. And we were asked the question, you know, what happens if there's 400 more of these put in town, or 4 more, or 3 more? You know, in general, we found, we think the market's gonna regulate it pretty well. We found 4 signs in town is about right, and you've seen a couple outlying signs be placed, and those guys are struggling. And you know, we don't plan to put any more electronic billboards in town in the near future, just because we feel like the market's saturated. And so I think that's good from a regulatory standpoint. When you can address things just through a market means, I think that's a good way to do it. And so those are my comments. Appreciate the time again. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, Mr. Friesen, thank you very much. There may be questions from the council. I'd like to ask Casey just to perhaps comment on some of the information provided to us related to the comments from staff on the comp plan does not have specific goals pertaining to billboards. Enlighten us a little bit on that, if you would, in terms of your thinking, the basis of your thinking to the Planning Commission.
Well, that's correct. Our comprehensive plan doesn't specifically address billboard signs. It does talk a little bit about establishing maybe a uniform theme for public signage, wayfinding signage, and that type of thing, beautification of corridors, etc. But just to give you a little background on what staff was thinking, we know that we're about to go into drafting an updated sign code for the city. And one of the concerns the staff has is allowing billboards, whether or not we should continue to even permit them in our commercial zones moving forward. And the draft that we have just recently presented to sign companies throughout the city is that we're recommending adding some limitations, adding some restrictions to billboards in these zones. And in this site in particular, we didn't see any other billboards in the vicinity. There are no other billboards in the neighborhood. This is the only one. And we didn't recommend enlarging it. We're not crazy about it being there in the first place, to be honest with you. But that's in general where we're coming from. We're looking at the character of that neighborhood, the aesthetic impact of that sign, the fact that there are 2 other freestanding signs on either side of it. Where staff's position on it is we try to encourage wherever possible that signs be consolidated together on one sign structure, and not to add to so-called clutter, proliferation of sign clutter along one of our main traveled, arterial streets in the city. This particular street is the highest traveled traffic volume. Average daily traffic is higher than any other in the city limits. So it's a well-traveled area, highly visible. And though this sign in particular, this property is not in our gateway corridor, the area to the east of it 17th Avenue from Lorraine Street moving east is a designated gateway corridor into the city. And we subject signs, all kinds of development to a little bit higher standard in that area.
Okay. It seems to me, I guess, in reading the material, that we currently are allowing this and did allow this previously, and it's just simply a matter of enlarging the footprint of the sign itself. And I drove it a couple of times, and I think my observation is that I think a larger footprint sign would potentially be safer, because it is set back somewhat, and you really have to focus on paying attention to what's on that sign. That was my impression of 30th and Lorraine too. I drove that, and it's a larger sign, and didn't find it to be offensive. Also looked on the west side of that static sign, the new sign that would potentially be placed there. Didn't see that to be any interference with the surrounding neighborhood. There are offices to the west, directly to the west there, so I didn't see any issues there. So those are my observations, and since we've allowed it at one point, I think it's a matter of long term in terms of the future zoning or sign code. I think that's for another day.
Sure. Well, when we make a recommendation as staff to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission disagrees with our recommendation, we ask them to make specific findings why they don't agree with staff. And in this case, they believe that increasing the size of the sign would be almost, it would be almost unnoticeable. As far as it is back from the street, it would make the sign more visible, and you would hardly discern that the sign had even been enlarged in the first place. And also looking at other intersections they felt were similar, the 30th and Lorraine intersection in particular, they felt was virtually no different from this intersection, and the city has already permitted a 300 square foot sign at that location as well. So I think it was on those two factors, the commission agreed unanimously to approve it as proposed. So
I agree
Yes,
with
sir.
the mayor for the same reasons. I drove it or pedaled it, whatever. The same thing.
So a sign half the size would be fine for you because.
Oh, I got
that's
ample
slower.
time. I got ample time to look at it
Yeah.
as I'm going. No, but I do. I agree with what the commissioner said. Also, I don't think it'd be noticeable. But I did have a question. Somewhere within the minutes, I did notice something. Somebody had made a comment about there had been some complaints. Could you speak to the nature of those complaints? What were they? They just didn't like signs, or?
that was a comment, I think, from our planning commission chairman.
Okay.
Yeah, it
And
is.
he didn't really specify.
It didn't get into it in the minutes either. So.
what the issue there was. I know staff has had a couple of comments from a couple of phone calls from concerned citizens when they see new billboards going up, but we don't receive a whole lot of complaints about them. Just we've had one or two.
And those complaints, again.
Just the people just don't like them.
Okay,
Just don't
and I'm
like
wondering if
seeing
that
them.
would-
Don't
yeah.
want them in their community.
Okay. All right. And they're welcome to that opinion as well. Yeah. Okay.
But Casey, if I read it right, people in the area, you did not have any comments from, say, the residents north or west.
That's correct. We didn't
Okay.
receive any comments at all.
Okay.
And that's why I was looking for if it was a light
Yeah.
complaint or a light
Yeah,
pollution,
right.
whatever you want to call
Yeah,
it. That's
no,
not what I'm getting.
Yeah, we didn't have any citizens attend the public hearing. No one
Okay.
came to make any comments at the hearing. We didn't receive anything in writing from the public.
Okay.
No.
I assume there's no dissent in the gallery
Yeah,
today.
we'll see. All right, council, any other questions?
A comment more than a question. One thing that bothers me, and it always bothers me, no matter what the issue, is just because we did it someplace else, that makes the new place to do it okay. And I don't think that's necessarily a wise way to go about. It's okay over here, so now it's okay over here. So I'm just sharing that as a sense. In this case for me, as well as in any case. especially, it's kind of some of the old adages, two rights don't make a wrong. Repeating the same mistake again doesn't necessarily. Now, that's not saying that 30th and Lorraine was a mistake. But again, that kind of comparison for me, I struggle with. I'd probably fall on the side if there was some comment either in general in past or that the chair of the Planning Commission had heard. I'm not a particular fan of billboards, period. I think they do make for visual clutter, whether they're an electronic billboard or whether they are a non-electronic. So I'm struggling with this. The comments you made, Mayor, I don't disagree with them. In terms of being able to more rapidly see something. At the same time, I'd argue against electronic billboards just because I think they tend to distract drivers. I know they distract me if I'm wanting to, here's the new thing coming along. But anyway, just some general thoughts and some comments in regards. I do have one question, and Casey, maybe you can answer it. Mr. Friesen, maybe you. Static, that is going to be electronic on the west side, I take it. No,
that's
it's
not
going to
the
be a
intention.
conventional paper or whatever they're made of. Okay. I tell you one thing, it'll definitely improve the looks from the west driving east to have a billboard, whether it's 160 square feet or 300, just to cover that in terms of appearance.
I had similar thoughts, but I was able to make peace myself with the fact that the current guidelines, it fits, within the current guidelines. If you feel that it shouldn't, then change the guidelines, which is what you're contemplating. But at the moment, it's the 300 square feet is within the guidelines, so I was able to make peace with that. Not necessarily because it's on 30th or whatever. So that's my thoughts.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions from council?
Another question, how will, with the improvement in electronics, is there a change in the brightness or and I guess that would be a combination of between that and the almost doubling of the surface area. What happens to the brightness level that's put out?
And I heard there's like a top 3 that I heard you guys talking about, and they're always talked about at all the meetings, and one of them is brightness, and it's a valid concern. These new boards are by far the best. We sent staff 50 pages worth of documentation on. We did a light study to determine what the candle power would be in the neighborhood areas. Is very, very minimal. It was indicated that there's more light coming from the street lights and lamps off of the porches than there is that's going to be spilled in. They're also very much more directional, the new LEDs are. So from a light perspective, it's de minimis. There was also a point of distraction that U.S. Department of Transportation did a study on this because it's a big deal for safety for them. And there's electronic billboards all over the United States, and there was an independent study done on that, and they basically found that the distraction is no more different than any other signage, and it was a big deal when that study came out. So, anything else I can answer?
To me, it's kind of like the difference, Steve, between watching regular television and HD television. I mean, to me, that's kind of a comparable parallel.
Well, yeah, and you get the message across that much more quickly in a clear, concise ad, and that's an important safety point for us. And one other thing on the electronic side, we're intending to put emergency alerts on the board, and the new boards allow for that. So Amber Alerts,
Okay.
tornado,
So you could interrupt what's happening,
right,
so to speak.
tornado warnings, things of that nature as well. And we'd like to work with the city going forward on special messaging. There's certain messages that may be emergent in nature that don't come out in a emergency alert, like evacuation or a closing or something like that. We'd like to work with the city on ways to put those on our billboards as well.
Well, as an editorial comment, I'm looking at Exhibit D in one of our attachments there. And wouldn't it be a great goal of the city of Hutchinson in the future to potentially look at all of those very ugly-looking wooden power poles and a lot of overhead power lines, and if we could bury those like you plan to bury your power there, wouldn't we have an improved gateway? So, editorial comment for the record. Work on that. Thank you very much.
That's a good comment. You're 100% correct.
Yeah.
That is something.
Wouldn't it be great if we could do that on 30th
Oh, yeah,
and 17th?
underground utilities would be wonderful.
Underground utilities.
but reality is another matter.
Where's our power company? Can they step up and do this?
Can do anything if we're willing to
If they're
pay.
willing.
They're
For the
willing.
right amount of money, yeah.
I understand that, so. All right. Sorry to digress from the topic at hand, but I had to get that in, so. All right, any other questions?
Would metal
of the
poles be okay?
applicant? Metal poles would be improved. Any other questions from, of council?
No.
Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. I will move to approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission to approve the conditional use permit for a billboard sign at 1330 East 17th Avenue with a 300 square foot digital billboard on the east face and a 300 square foot static billboard on the west face pursuant to the factors and conditions listed.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Pyros de Carvalho,
Abstain.
Soldner,
Yes.
Inskeep,
Yes.
Deckent,
Yes.
Dave Line.
Yes. All right, next item, please.
A
Item-
comment, if I may.
Yes.
I'd sure encourage planning if there's some serious thought being given to modification or more guidance or whatever as it relates to signs to expeditiously move that along. And I'm sure you're not dragging your feet, but just a comment to you. Thank you.
That's in progress. I think the Planning Commission's meeting in a couple weeks. Yeah.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
And
Thanks.
it's a lot of eyes on the draft right now.
Yeah.
All right, Linda, next item.
Item 9B, consider acceptance of the 2017 Emergency Solutions Grant.
Good morning, Jana McCarran, Director of Planning and Development. And I don't have a formal presentation with slides for you here this morning because I think you're probably fairly familiar with this grant. We were here May 2nd to request application for the grant. The city's actually a pass-through. The grant comes from the state, passed through the city, and the beneficiary is the Sexual Assault Domestic Violence Center, SADVC. The grant has been awarded in the amount of $39,500 to SADVC, plus $1,068 that the city would get for administering the grant. It is a reimbursement grant. They have to show that they incurred the expenses, then they turn in the receipts to us. We file it with the state, we get the money, we send it on to them. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't know if Donna Davis is in the
She's not
audience. I don't see her in the audience, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
There was a reduction. There was a reduction from the requested amount. Do we have a sense of?
I think that with the change in administration at the federal level, because these are federal pass-through dollars, I believe that budgets were cut in this area, and it wasn't a significant change for us, so that's a good sign. I think also in the past, we haven't historically spent all the money, although this year SADVC did a much better job of spending the money they were allocated. So it's probably a combination of those two factors why it wasn't quite as much as they requested.
And no expense to the city to administer. We get our.
We actually
Yeah,
get, I think it's 2.5%
Mhm.
for administering the grant.
Yeah.
And Amy does a great job on that.
There we go.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Council, do we have a motion?
Oh,
Go ahead.
Move to accept the 2017 Emergency Solutions Grant from the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation in the amount of $40,568 and authorize the mayor to sign grant acceptance documents.
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call roll.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dateline?
Yes. Next item.
Item 9C, consider contract with the Fraternal Order of Police for 2018.
Good morning, council. I'm Merrill Dye, the Assistant City Manager. Excuse me. We have before you today the last final union contract to be settled for 2018. This is a one-year contract with the Fraternal Order of Police. The first change involves that the FOP is now moving away from the step plan that we've had in place for many years and moving to the open pay range in Article 10, compensation. So what this provision includes is that employees will be paid a base rate in accordance with the minimum and maximum for their job class. Any employee who is below the minimum will be brought to the minimum pay rate for that new pay range at the beginning of the payroll year for 2018. New hires, new employees will be hired at the minimum of the pay range in the Appendix B included in your contract. Those employees who have certification as a Kansas law enforcement officer and less than 5 years of experience can be hired up to 5% above the minimum of the wage scale. Employees who have, or new hires, I'm sorry, who have that same certification and a minimum of 6 years of law enforcement experience may be placed up to 8% above the minimum. An employee that is promoted to a higher job class shall receive the greater of the minimum pay rate for their position or a 5% increase over the employee's previous pay rate. Also, provided it has been a minimum of 6 months from the employee's last merit review date, a prorated merit increase will be applied to the employee's pre-promotion pay rate. An employee that is promoted or demoted will be evaluated and considered for a merit increase on the 12-month anniversary following the promotion or demotion. During the 2018 payroll year, employees with satisfactory performance during the prior year rating period will be eligible to receive a base wage increase of 3%, not to exceed the maximum pay rate. And then we have 3 areas of the contract that have been eliminated because they are now covered under Article 10, Section 1 for compensation. And that includes Section 4 of Article 10, merit increases, Section 6 of Article 10, certified law enforcement officer, and also Article 20, promotional ranking procedures. All that language has been folded back into the compensation article in Section 1, base pay administration. Again, this is a one-year contract from January 1 through December 31st. I'll be happy to stand for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Merrill, for that overview. Council, do you have questions?
Just a comment. Merrill, thank you for the markup, strike through.
Certainly.
Made it real simple to see those
Follow.
things.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I would move to approve the 2018 Memorandum of Understanding with the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge Number 7 and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please call roll.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dateline?
Yes. Next item.
Item 9D, consider 2018 budget.
All right, we've had our public hearing. We've closed that, and now we're at a point in time to consider the 2018 budget for adoption. Do we have a motion?
I will move to approve the 2018 budget as presented.
Second,
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
just a comment, not a biggie. The cover memo said that we were looking at a 1 mil
Yeah,
increase.
we're not, it's like.
And
Yeah.
you, in your comments, John, had commented it'd be about a 0.34.
0.34.
It's .34.
Right.
Where did?
It's the one line
The single
right
line.
above the comparison between
Oh.
17 and 18.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry about that. Yeah, it's .334,
Yeah.
right.
It's
Thank you.
about
for
Well,
that.
I did my own math and
No.
you
Yeah.
verified that.
And I would just comment, just for people to understand, we spent a lot of time talking about a $35 million general fund budget, but our total budget that we're approving today is $86.3 million. So it's a large budget that we operate. Also, we're including the Hutchinson Recreation Commission budget. They've already held their public hearing, and so that's reflected in there as well. But so that's all I have, Mayor.
Well, I think for the benefit of the public, those who heard the public hearing, and I think the council would agree that this was a challenging budget year, 2018. We took our work very serious. I think the budget has been thoroughly vetted in all respects. Mr. Beardoff mentioned the budget cuts. My calculations indicate from the budget cuts starting on 4 different study sessions, June 9th, June 20th, June 27th, and July 5th, that about $3.3 million of budget cuts from the original budget that we looked at have been incorporated into this budget. So on a $35 million budget, that's about a 10% budget cut. And as we said before, some of these are capital improvements, important equipment replacements and so on. So we're basically delaying and deferring these important investments. So it certainly got our attention in terms of the budget and the one particular graph in terms of the decline in terms of our ending balances. That I think was central to our concerns in terms of forcing these kinds of budget cuts. But with a very modest mill levy increase of 0.34, the city is in good financial solvent condition, and I think the public certainly needs to understand and appreciate that. So with that, I would call for a vote.
Iris De Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dabeline?
Yes. Next item.
Item 10, report of city officials.
All right, let's start with Nancy.
I want to thank both the police department and the fire department and the community for their efforts in the school supply raising activities this weekend. So thank you.
Yep. Steve?
Nothing, thank you.
Nothing? All right.
Nothing
about
to
you,
report
Dave?
this time.
Jade?
Just quickly, I had a few comments with the article and the vote last time on the new trail that will go through the Kansas City Fair. Had a few comments about maintenance on current trails, and I know that that's coming up rather quickly, but I thought if you could just do a quick review of that.
Yep, very good. I think I'll have Justin update you on. We're really close, and that is a major issue. It has been growing for some time, and hopefully we'll get that addressed quickly.
Good morning. Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. The biggest concern with our current trails are the Jim Martinez Trail, the asphalt trail, and the large cracks we have. We actually have a bid out right now for a crack fill project to fill those cracks. So a few weeks ago, I did jump in a gator and I drove the entire length of the trail. Believe it or not, there are 670 cracks that measure 2 inches and greater. I didn't measure every single crack, but they measure 2 inches and greater. So there is significant cracking on the trail. So earlier this spring, engineering department did experiment with a crack fill product on a few roads in town. I had them do a handful of cracks in Cary Park as well to see how that product would perform on a trail. Was very happy with how that product worked, so we are now bidding that out. We hope to have all those cracks filled by the first of November as a deadline for completion on this project. So,
Fantastic.
Good.
It'll come out of the Trail Reserve Fund. I'm anticipating the cost of that's going to be roughly $40,000, and we do have enough funding in that reserve for this project.
And then in the future, we're using a different material, right?
Most of our trails now are concrete.
Concrete, that's what I thought.
Yeah, they're more expensive to put in, but they're easier to maintain. The other thing about concrete is if we do have some cracks and we do have some sections we need to repair, we can do that with in-house crews. With asphalt, we really don't have that option. So.
Okay.
And the concrete ones look like the day they went in. I
Yeah.
see them day after day, and yeah. Can we do something about the sandburrs on the north trail? A guy who's on a bike with two inflated tires.
I jogged it the other day, and we are getting some creep. Yeah, we'll look and see if we can't spray a foot on either side. Or
No
something.
worries. And you mentioned the new material, and I can vouch for that on those couple sections you did as you enter the park, Cary Park. Is that also the same material they used in the Kissawa North? I don't know what that development
Yeah,
is.
Yes.
Same
Yes.
material, same. Okay, yeah, and that seems to be working up there as well. So very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
All right, Jade, any?
No, that sounds great.
All right, very good.
Really happy to hear that. I know that's, like you mentioned, it's been a long time coming, and appreciate your work on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Deardoff?
Just the only thing I want to mention is, as we all know, we lost Craig Morrison here a couple weeks ago, and our assistant parks and facilities director, and there was a great group of contingent from Hutchinson and all around that went to the funeral of him, Great Bend, last Friday, and so we're going to miss him. He was just one of those good guys, and a big hole in our department, and we want to wish his family all the best.
For sure.
Thank you, sir.
Sad.
All right, if there's no further business, call for adjournment. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second, please call roll.
Pyrus J. Carvalho?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Lane?
Yes.